वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। To summarize in one sentence what Vedanta is talking about, I like what Nakul said, that it's almost like you're swimming in the sea of awareness, really, right? And actually, who are you? You are not one drop. You are that awareness. Exactly, you are that awareness. Please don't think about yourself as one little entity who's swimming in that ocean of awareness. Because what is the reality is that whoever is swimming, so-called the characters who are swimming, they are what? They are mithya. They depend upon that awareness for their existence. Please understand, because there are no two things. It's not like you are one thing and then there is ocean of awareness and you are swimming in there. All that is here is one awareness. And in that awareness, what all the characters are emerging, and as though all the transactions are taking place. And it's exactly like a dream. From your awareness, you create what? Dream time, dream space, dream characters. Okay? The mountains, the rivers, the characters, all the interactions take place within that awareness. Okay? All the feelings, all the different sufferings, everything takes place within what? That same awareness. While all that is taking place, is awareness ever affected? Awareness is never affected, right? It is always free. So this is what Vedanta, the vision of Vedanta is very, very different from just a normal kind of a self-help talk that is given, saying that, you know, how you behave in this world, how you get rid of your certain distortions. It's very, very different, okay? Because in its vision, you are basically the center of the universe. And what is very interesting is, you live your life, even though you think you're a tiny individual, okay? You live your life thinking what? In your life, you're the center. And you think really that you are the center of the universe. Even if you don't know the reality of your nature, what happens? Your whole life as one individual becomes really the center. Everything else is what? Somehow secondary. Okay? Now, what is the reality? That you are the center of the universe, but not in the way that you think it is, which is one individual who becomes the focus. You are the center of the universe because awareness is the only thing that exists. And where is that awareness available to you? Please don't think that awareness is available to you as something that, you know, like a scientist is looking at, or a philosopher is looking at the universe and thinking about what the nature of the universe is, and what? You always remain what? A thinker who's outside, right? And who's observing the universe and making conclusions about the universe. Now what do you understand? That this given entity itself is what? It's a relative entity, and wherever there is a relative entity, awareness is there at its truth. Okay? So that means that you think you are as good as the body and mind, but as we saw, the body is nothing but atoms and particles and cells. That you know you are not. Mind is nothing but what? Different types of thoughts which can be put in 4 categories. Which are the 4 categories? Emotions, intellect, memories, and eye sense. And all those are variable, because your eye sense keeps getting connected with your emotions, with your intellect, with your memories, and that I sense keeps changing. Because one day you feel I'm really happy, next day you feel I'm down, third day you feel, oh, I feel really compassionate and I feel expanded and I want to do something about my existence in this way. So it keeps on changing, and in fact in one day your I sense changes how many times? Okay? So all of these are variable. If you were any one of them, and if that was your intrinsic nature, you can't ever get rid of it. The very fact that all this comes and goes, and you come to know that absence and presence means what? You are distinct from all of these things. Okay? And who you are is basically already free from whatever is happening at the level of your mind, and also what? With reference to your physical body. So that is something that Vedanta talks about. It's not an ordinary reality. And if it is truth about you, and if it is truth about her, and it is truth about you, then all that is here is then how many awarenesses? We may think that there are many different awarenesses because there are many different bodies. But what we now understand is the fact that just as we saw many times earlier, that the space seems to be divided into glass space, cup space, and little cup space, but all that is here is one space which seems to be confined. Awareness is exactly the same. And awareness is free from attributes of what? All the different physical bodies, all the different minds, okay? And anything that exists. Okay? And whatever that exists, those forms that exist, what did we understand? That they are mithya. Okay? So what we understood is the relationship between that awareness and everything else. Because are there two things? Awareness and everything else. What did we understand? The everything else is mithya. What does mithya mean? It has a dependent reality. So that means what seems to be all very tangible and very real, when I look into it, it is what? The whole class of quantum physics that we saw, that it is just nothing but atoms and particles. And then what we said is it only is ultimately a concept, and that concept depends upon awareness. So that means forms are not independent of awareness. Awareness is what? Satyam. It is independent of forms. Forms keep changing all the time. The time keeps changing. The space and the relativity of space, which is very, the relativity of time and space is shown very clearly in that movie that Loka was talking about, Interstellar. So that means it's now, that is something that we have been talking about in Vedic times, the relativity of time and space. Okay. What in fact, I'll just give you a small example of how we have been talking about this relativity of time and space. This, you know, the ritual we do, the Vedic ritual, for when somebody has passed away, and we do it, it's called Shraddha. I don't know if you know anything about it. But that Shraddha is done every year, right? So you remember your ancestors and you thank them for their contribution to your life. That is something which is very nice, right? Because they have contributed to you being who you are. Okay? Now the idea is you remember them once a year, but what they said is 1 year here is 1 day there. Okay? So that means when you remember them every year, with reference to Earth time, with reference to their time, it is every day. Okay? So that means that concept was already there. And this is...
So in Vedic world it's believed that ancestry has a big role in our
not really. I mean, it just basically what the Vedic vision of life is, that all that is here is one awareness. But that awareness, when it manifests as different forms, these forms are not random. Okay? So they are arranged through series of laws. And that those laws are interconnecting every form with the other. So that is, and now we will see the next aspect of this Vedic teaching, which is what is Ishvara, the cause of the universe. So So that is yet to come. Because up to now, what we have studied is who you are, which is awareness, and what is the nature of the universe, which is what? It has a dependent reality. Up to now we have seen that much. Then the third question still remains as to how all these different forms, how did they come about? So that is still yet to be answered. But before that is answered, there are a few verses here who are talking about the preparedness that is necessary to first understand this knowledge and then to live this knowledge. Okay? So let's see some of the verses. It is 1 to 24. People have texts? Okay. So here he says, Na avaritaha duri dushcharitat ashantaha na asamahitaha na ashanta manasaha vahi pragnanenam apuyat. Enam pragnanam apuyat. Okay? So this particular knowledge cannot be gained by who? Dushcharitat na avaritaha. The person who has not yet withdrawn oneself from misconduct. Okay? So what does it mean? Why?
Actually, you have to lead a righteous life.
Sorry?
You have to lead a righteous life.
Yeah, exactly. So now, excellent, right? You have to lead a righteous life. Why? What is the connection? We had a huge discussion before we got into the nature of reality about righteousness, right? So why, how is it connected? Very often people ask, if I'm already free and awareness is already never affected by anything and everything depends upon awareness, where is the question of dharma? People ask, right? Where is the connection? Can you find a connection?
Basically, if you don't follow your dharma, you cannot understand.
Exactly. That is the connection.
And
Because
we also said that dharma itself is not standard.
It is
varies
not.
From,
It's very relative.
it's
It is relative.
Yeah, so
True.
who decides?
So no, even though it is relative, it's not completely relative. Please understand, what we talk about is dharma being universal. The first point is, it is universal. Okay? Certain values are universal, but even though they are universal, they are not absolute, because at times they require interpretation. So that means there are exceptions, and there are grey areas. And that doesn't mean that it's totally relative. Where would you think is the connection? But I think what Uday is saying is absolutely right. See here, one major difference between this knowledge and anything else is, let's say a scientist is looking at the reality, okay? And he's very, very good at finding out some laws that exist in the universe. But he or she, when that person is behaving in the world, can be highly what? Sometimes very immature, and sometimes you find that people are geniuses in one given subject matter, but it doesn't mean that they are very mature and aware human beings, right? So you find very often, in fact very often you find that people get so carried away in one given thing and they excel in that, but the overall growth, overall maturity, emotional maturity is lacking at times. Or sometimes people can be quite indifferent or even cruel.
No, but even I've seen people who are lead a very good life and lead it the way like they should be, but they don't necessarily maybe intellectually able to think like this. So
Yeah, that's true. So that means it's both ways. You can be ethical, that's very good. You can be ethical, but you can still be relatively happy with whatever vision of life that you have, and you don't want to go one step further in knowing the reality. That is true.
Or you think that is your reality.
Or that is, yeah, exactly. So that means that you have stopped there using your own free will. See, nobody has told you that you have to stop here. That's where we say it's your free will. How far you can use your free will is entirely up to you. So you can't blame anybody else for, if that's what they are satisfied with, it is fine, we are not judging them, right? But there is a lot more to learn about life and about your nature if you feel that this is something that is necessary in your life, then that knowledge is available. Everything is like that actually, okay? You have science, you have music, you have amazing people, but you have to use your free will to what? Go and learn from them. It's all available as a potential. Everything is available to as a potential. What do you choose and where do you pursue, where do you devote your time is according to your values. What do you think is important in your life? Right? That's always the case. Just as it is the case for physics, mathematics, music, painting, architect, it is also valid for Vedanta. Okay? And all these people either can be ethical or need not be ethical. You can be a doctor and you can be highly ethical and you need not be ethical. Right? You can be a musician, you can be highly ethical or need not be ethical.
But there is no personal growth.
Exactly. But what we are seeing in Vedanta is, if the inquiry is about yourself, what is the nature of inquiry? What is the subject matter of inquiry? What distinguishes Vedanta from everything else is what? In everything else, you are looking at something else. Right? Here, the subject matter of inquiry is I. If the subject matter of inquiry is I, you cannot, on one hand, understand all that is here is me, and at the same time, what? Be cruel to somebody else. Because that means you have not understood. That means somewhere along there is two information staying separate from the other, it's not integrated. Okay? That means when you change the vision of the world, this is why we say it's not just like watching a movie and as an outsider seeing, oh, everything is one or anything like that. It is about I. Please understand, and if you really understand and assimilate this knowledge, you cannot, because all our transactions in the world are based on what? You're implicitly or explicitly understanding I am this tiny little individual and I have to protect myself and I have to engage in the world in a way that I maximize my gain. This is our orientation. Okay? So you can't continue to have that orientation and at the same time claim to say that I understand all that is here is one. You have to do what? You need to, in order for you to live this vision, the change of perspective, you need to what? Integrate, you have to rethink the universe and rethink your role in it and relive it. You can't just continue to be the same as before and say that I understand. So that's why, even though it's an accomplished fact, the nature of I is an accomplished fact. But where is the main job? The main job is what? Yeah, understanding it accurately and reorienting your life in keeping with this newly acquired wisdom of what the nature of reality is. And that takes time. Because our orientations are so strong and they are so kind of deep-rooted that we don't even realize that they exist. I'll just give you an example, a very interesting example, and that is that yesterday I had a class and we were talking about ethics. And there was this whole thing about how the ethics, even though they are universal, they are relative. And in order to show that, I give a very, very simple example. Okay? The simple example was that, let's say you are, during the Second World War, you are a German and you're giving a shelter to a Nazi, and the shelter to a Jew, and a Nazi police comes and asks you, are you what? Hiding somebody in your home? What answer will you give?
You protect.
You want to protect, right?
So
Because that
the
is
whole point of hiding them is to protect.
exactly, right? So that means you are not speaking the truth in some ways, but that not speaking the truth, is it some, if you stick to this rule of not speaking the truth, and if you fail to interpret that, what will happen? Right? So this is something which is very important, that at times, this is what we mean by relativity of dharma. Relativity of dharma doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means that at times we need to interpret it, because there is a larger rule. Okay? So then, this person who was in the class, she said, but guess what? What if you have your children and you feel that Nazi police will if they find out that you are hiding somebody and you did not tell the truth, will not only kill the Jews but also kill your kids. So then what will you do? Now, it's true, it's a possibility, and this is why we say that dharma is very complex. Please understand, the whole Vedic vision of dharma is not simplistic.
Is dharma mithya or to
Sorry?
Is dharma mithya as well? Is it like dependent?
It is within mithya. Yes, because the forms are mithya and the laws which arrange those forms are also absolute. We will see that it is mithya. That's why there is no absolute. The only thing which is absolute is this reality. That is the only thing which is absolute. Everything else is relative. That's why it is complex, and that's why there is no white and black. But within that, you still have to do the best. You can't ignore it. That's the trick. Okay? So now, what I told her is that in this hypothetical situation that she's coming up with, everything is negative. Right? That she will be found out, that there is, that not only those people will die, but her own kids will die. So many times we make decision based on what? Creating such an imaginary scenario where everything is negative. That means we fail to see, or we fail to actually understand that there is these laws which are at work. They are dynamic. Okay? Don't think of the world as a static, dumb world, and within which you have to be ethical. Please understand that. That is a very deep-rooted understanding that we have about the world. That the forces are what? Dumb. That you have to change. And this is where, in fact, the Vedic vision is, what we think is generally dumb, that there is a sun. So you pray to the sun, because that sun is not just helium and hydrogen, which is converting itself into hydrogen in order to, it's not just gases. For us, there is an intelligence which makes the sun what it is. That intelligence is at work. Right? So don't think of yourself as living in some dead universe. The water that is there, which is making your life possible, there is an intelligence which makes that water what it is. There is an intelligence which makes your body what it is.
And those are all dependent on the
laws of Ishvara, that we will see. Right? So that means that there is this whole intelligence that I will talk to you a little bit later. Right? So you will understand it much more clearly, Riya. But what I want you to understand is, when you look into how to make a decision in this world, you cannot think about this world as some dumb thing which has no intelligence of its own. Because the Vedic vision is that awareness is organizing all these things. First brings about these forms and organizing these forms constantly through series of laws which are infallible in nature. And unless you change that very vision, what will happen is that your whole knowledge of what Vedanta is saying is not integrated. So it's a very deep and quiet revolution. How you think, how you see the world. Because if you begin to see that every action that you make, every choice you make is never going to be not rewarded. You make different kinds of choices. Because you have confidence in the fairness of the universe. You need to change a very deep-rooted orientation. Okay? And this is what we mean by it takes time to first totally understand the vision, make it all one whole without just some departments of my brain, some of them understand and some of them continue to behave how it all has to be integrated. In fact, Surya was showing to his MBA students there is this whole new research on neurosciences which show just a simple experiment which show that when you start meditating, for example, there is a whole, physically, there is a different wiring that takes place in the brain. It's physical, it's not just mentally how you feel good, you feel calm, you feel, more composed. It's not only about that. So that means the wiring of your brain, the way the neurons tick, they change over a period of time. And for Vedanta, it's exactly the same. The whole learning is complete when you rewire your brain to see this reality and to live it. Until then, it's all just what? Some part of your brain which is understanding vaguely and the others continue to be what they are. There is no integration of the two. Okay? So this is what is highlighted here by saying the person who has not stayed away from misconduct means the person who doesn't live a righteous life. Now, when the person fails to live a righteous life, why do people not follow universal ethical values? In some cases, the interpretation is required, but in many cases, people abuse, right? Why do they do that? Because they still think of themselves as this little individual, right? And then you want to protect your self-interest. So that means, now, can you say that the person has understood that I am that awareness which is limitless? Because the person is still behaving as what? Yeah, a limited person who is so compellingly, trying to satisfy one's likes and dislikes, where there is no regard for other person's rights. Okay?
So it's actually not that you should lead a righteous life to understand Vedanta. It can
Both.
also be that understanding Vedanta will lead you to read a...
Absolutely, both. Actually, both.
You can come from misconduct, but once you understand it,
yeah,
will
you
not
change.
Yeah.
You automatically change. And sometimes, even when you understand, some habitual thinking may continue, but you have to be deliberate and then you have to change that too, in order for the whole process to be over. So both ways, you're right. One reinforces the other. And that is continuing till the time that what? The whole thing is clear. The person operates out of clarity and not out of confusion. Okay? So that is the first thing. The other one is na asamahitaha. Asamahitaha, here is the person who is not resolved. Okay? So now here, there is something else which is talked about. You can be highly ethical, but you still can be what? Angry. You can be sad. Right? You can be having a lot of fear. Okay? So that means one thing is your ethical life, the other thing is what? Your emotional life. Now imagine, now again go back. Can you really understand, can you claim that you have understood all that is here is one, which is myself, and still continue to have tremendous fears? This is where you see that, it's so important when we are talking about this knowledge. It's so important to relatively prepare yourself, because otherwise it's just disconnected with your being. Okay? So now, here, let's look at 2 or 3 different emotions that is a problem for many of us, all of us in fact, right? Let's take first thing, which is a fear. Okay? Now fear, there is, again you have to, people give this whole lecture about how you should be free from fear. Vedanta doesn't give you a lecture on how you should be free from fear, because everybody wants to be free from fear and people don't know how. So that means Vedanta shows you how to be free from fear rather than tell you not to be free. Not to have fear, right? One thing, when we are talking about fear, we need to distinguish between what we call the instinctive fear and psychological fear. What do we mean? Okay? One thing is, imagine, I used to live in New York for many years, and I used to study at this university which was very close to Harlem. And at times, those times we didn't have laptops and all. It was a time that we had to go to computer lab and we had to work. So let's say if you are walking back to your home around 11:30 at night, in Manhattan, near Harlem, and those days it was not safe, right? And 2 big guys come, okay? And you say, oh, all that is here is one. And all these forms are just mithya.
You'll be rounded to the ground, you really become one.
Absolutely. Exactly. Right? So you need to what? That thing of caution. You have to.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not, creating some kind of an artificial world. Please understand, we are not talking about some artificial positive thinking being disconnected with the world. Okay? You have to take precaution.
Would you say that's a rational fear?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This is something which is what we call instinctual fear, which is very healthy. It is valid because that mechanism is given to you in your brain to protect yourself.
It's survival.
It's survival.
Like when you know you've been followed.
Yeah. And that you need to use, and you need to continue to use, because they are what? Certain laws. They are laws of the universe. And you need to honor them. You can't disregard them. Okay? So this is where we say those fears are very valid. We are not trying to eliminate those. Okay? But in addition to those very practical, rational fears that we have, there are what we call psychological fears. What are those psychological fears?
Monsters under my bed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fear of losing your job and your whole life will collapse.
Exactly.
So those are the bigger ones.
They hold you back.
They hold you back.
Things have not yet happened.
Yeah.
And you think that they have happened, and then what? You create one whole big story around it. And then what? You have...
You make decisions based on that. That's good.
Exactly. This is what, that classic example, that lady, she says, oh yeah, but what if they find out and my kids will be killed and they will be killed and everybody will be killed, and she makes a decision based on that imaginary scenario rather than what is the right thing to do. And this is what we mean by fear holds us. And many of these times, those fears are imaginary rather than rational.
Is there a problem that if you understand Vedanta,
Yeah.
but your immediate external environment doesn't, you run this big risk of getting taken for granted, or getting used, because you're living this... No, but you said that everything has a cause and effect.
Exactly.
So in the end it comes back.
It comes back.
But that's a pretty long-term view to
But
take.
that's a,
In the end, it all
and it's a very
comes back.
self-sacrificing view to very...
Now,
Yeah.
it's a long-term view, but it is also short-term. There is this lady in my class, in that after this I have this another, and she's a Parsi woman, and she's a very dynamic, very nice, I was telling that, like in the long run, and she says, why long run? I think you can see it in the short run too, right? And I think many times, something that happens may be long-term, but many messages are given to us in terms of, guilt feeling,
Yeah, we
fears.
talked about that.
Yeah.
If you don't feel happy with yourself, there's always that.
So there are very immediate, the universe, please understand, it's an intelligent universe. Okay? It is giving you clues all the time. And what happens is, we operate so much from our own created world that we fail to take those clues that the universe is giving. There's a lot of wisdom in the universe. Okay? So therefore, there is a long term and there is also a short term. Immediate, in fact, almost instantaneous that is given to us all the time. Okay? So therefore, this whole psyche that, if I'm good, I will suffer or it will not be rewarded, one has to change. Because that shows that you think that there's no confidence in the working of the universe.
But sometimes even thinking that I will do a good deed, I'll feed the stray dog because I'll be rewarded, even that's bad, right?
See, it's not really bad or anything, but what I mean to say is that you actually have to use your discretion.
Can't bribe the universe.
No, but isn't that a bad wrong way of thinking? Because that's how sometimes
We
we
chose us the different forms of charity, right?
Yeah, so that is going to come. See, what we talk about is intention. Okay? So that means your intention. See, we don't give an advice. One thing is very good about Vedanta. They don't tell you, oh, you should not think like that or you should think like that. What we say is that when you get rewarded for the result, for the actions that you have performed, not only the action counts, but also your intention behind the action counts. So that means the laws operate in a way that they incorporate your intention.
It's very important.
Yeah, which is very important. But now I will show you certain nuances of this example that you give, right? That you want to feed the stray dog and you think that you will merit out of that. Okay. Now, when we studied this Indian philosophy, that is a forest. Okay? And in that forest, all these stray dogs, they create a mess. Okay? But all these Westerners who come, they have this huge feeling of responsibility towards these dogs. So they keep feeding them. But the dogs then go and do all kinds of crazy things, right? So that means it disturbs Indians so much because they said now they are wild dogs. They are used to getting their food, from outside. We don't have all these responsibility of feeding them because they can find they are not domesticated dogs or anything. But they have this whole great sense of their responsibility towards animals, and they actually end up disturbing the whole environment a lot. Yeah. So that means all our whole vision of what is right and what is wrong itself has to be dynamic. What happens is that we get totally fixed into our narrow view of the world. We forget to see the larger picture. So constantly revising.
There's a role of conscience here because a lot of the time you do stuff but you always know, right?
You always know.
There is a role of conscience. Where does it fall into this, right? Because everyone, you could be doing something, but like I said, there's always some kind of sense.
And this is what I mean by intelligence of the universe. Who is giving you this particular sense? You don't want to have it. It's not your personal choice to have this feeling of guilt. Nobody wants to actually, right? But that is what I talk about as intelligence in the universe. It's giving you feedback about the nature of your action. You may choose to ignore it, but it is giving you immediately. So the universe is working.
The conscience would be the intellect, what would that?
It is given to the human brain, absolutely. And human brain is programmed in a way that it is constantly interacting with the universe. Okay? So the minute you perform an action in the universe gives you the feedback about the nature of that action. And that is received where? In your brain. And then it's not only the immediate response but also the long-term repercussions. Because there are laws. Okay? So one thing, when I say that one thing is a fear which is a biological fear, an instinct which is healthy, the other one is the psychological fear which is our own fears. right? And our own fears, in fact, somebody else yesterday was saying that our own fears can be sometimes so unreasonable that, there is this old couple and one person now is so fearful of something happening to them because they are living alone and they are in maybe their 70s. Okay? So his wife is very active and she's a doctor, medical doctor. He doesn't let his wife go out because he's so afraid something will happen to her. Okay? Or every time she goes out, she immediately has to call him and tell him where she is and how she is. And that is like so difficult for his wife to all the time think about calling her husband and telling him every time where she is and how she is doing. So that means it is really keeping you from living a healthy life. So because your mind is making you believe that these bad things are going to happen when nothing has happened yet. So these are the fears that you need to, how do you take care of these fears?
Understanding.
Exactly. Understanding first is that you need to understand that you have a certain orientation which are not in keeping with realities. Okay? Now here, the knowledge of how will this knowledge of all that is awareness, how will it work? How will you incorporate this knowledge of all that is here as awareness, which is manifesting in different names and forms? How will you use it to get rid of these fears? The essential link here is the order.
Is that?
The laws which organizes all these different forms, okay, in a way that there is a kind of a universe which is an intelligent universe. Even though it is mithya, it is not something which is dumb universe. Okay? So that is this whole new thing that I will talk about in the next classes. But that is, because then otherwise what will happen is...
But you can affect the laws by your actions.
Exactly. So that means you are very proactive. Because those laws are not just applied to you randomly. They are based on your actions. So where is the key? The key is your actions. Being proactive about things that you need to change. Because unless you are proactive, things will not change. Even if you want to change your orientations, what do you need to do? You need to be proactive in first detecting those distortions and then what? Undoing those distortions cognitively by seeing that here I am subjective. The third is what? Based now after having changed your understanding, it has to be followed up with what? Actions. Different actions. Because unless you do all of this, it's just a lip service. You're not really understanding the vision. Okay? So this is where you need to, and it's very nice that Riya said that please don't think that it all is going to automatically happen. Those change of orientations have to be initiated by you, and they have to be initiated by you, which is based on understanding how the universe works accurately. Not based on your imagination of how the universe works. And then, once you really understand things, you need to do things differently. And when you do things differently, the laws are such that your universe, the outcomes will change. They have to change. They cannot but change. Whether in the short run or long run, in both, in some ways. Okay. So this is what we talk about fear. What about anger? What do you think? What is the cause of anger? Many people suffer from this. What do you think is the source of anger?
Frustration.
Yeah, exactly. So how does the frustration, when is a person frustrated?
Things are not going his way.
Exactly. So that means you have an illusion of control. you think that you control. That is another misconception. Right? That because whole life we are so busy in trying to control what? The external environment according to our wishes. Everybody wants to control. And
Also
who is
according to dharma.
dharma is a
You could get angry because someone in your opinion is doing something which is not dharmic.
yeah. So you can get angry. Let's first see where does the anger come and where the frustration comes, the root cause, right? Because even there, you haven't, you're right, you are angry, right? Because you think that you can control that other person. But actually, you don't really, you can't even control very well what you yourself are going to feel, or what you yourself are going to think or you're going to feel in 10 days from now. Then you want to control others and others' behaviors and all that. That is impossible. And in fact, this is the source of all the interpersonal relationship problems with interpersonal relationship. Why? Because each one, the closer you are, what are you trying to do? You control the other person. You want the person to behave like what you think is right, to act according to what you think is the right way to act. So there is this whole issue of control. And what is the other person trying to do? Same thing. Right? And then what happens? It's a disaster. It's true. Right? That love and all these lovely things, they soon end up with huge fights. They flare up like anything. People and all their very deep emotions, they just come out. Okay? And that's where we say that control is something which is a human need. Right? Why is there a human need to control?
You don't really have faith in the Lord.
Exactly. Right? So you don't have the faith in the working of the universe. So that means you have a plan as to how the universe should be, and what do? Constantly what? Manipulate the forces. Try very hard to manipulate the forces in a way that everything is exactly according to your needs. And what's your capacity to do that? Very little.
But also when you want to control something that I have big issues with, and these are the few things that really make me angry. People blowing horns at traffic lights, people cutting queues at the I mean, these are the things that are wrong, you know.
That's
and it
true.
really frustrates me. Like the signal goes from red to green, and 5 cars down, they all start. It really gets me. I can't handle it because it is so stupid.
It is stupid, that's true, but you know, I mean...
And they are trying to control. They are trying to tell the car first that no.
That is true. But you know, how is your being angry going to help the situation?
It will drive me to...
You can only control your reaction.
Exactly. You can't totally, or you can start a campaign, do something proactive. Start a, you know, you belong to a privileged class, you know so many people. And start, this is where this whole, I like at least some aspects of this Modi thing that, you know, Swachh Bharat. Take something in your hand, start little thing, because that one action on your part is going to make a difference. Okay? Either you somehow look at your reactions and try to live with it, because that's the only thing that you can really do, or you take some proactive action, because otherwise you are creating a situation where neither you change anything externally, nor that anger and frustration every time you go on the street is good for you. So both ways it is no gain. So here what we are trying to do is to do things which are proactive. Whatever is in my hand, I begin to do things. Okay? Both at the level of my accepting First, by recognizing the fact that I don't control it. That itself gives you a huge what? Relief. Because you are not constantly trying to control, and then because you cannot control and you still have an illusion of controlling, you are frustrated all the time. Once you understand that I don't totally control, there is a law of cause and effect, which is already taking care of what? Organizing the universe. Now, but within that, I have a role to play.
I think a lot of these emotions also rise from insecurity.
Exactly.
But how we want to get over that?
Yeah. So we will go into that, right? The first thing is that here, right? So if you want to do something about it, because you are a participant in the universe, the law is taking care of things, but the law is not just organizing things. The law is organizing things based on our actions. So if you want things to be different, what do you need to do? At least start with your actions being different. And whatever you can do, and what happens is, over a period of time, your sphere of influence increases. Nobody starts being a big leader. Mahatma Gandhi did not start as a national leader. He just started as a lawyer who left South Africa and came to India with this whole vision in his mind of what? Independent India. Then what?
You said be the change you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that takes care of two things. One is what? You give up that whole thing of controlling and complaining mind, and you become what? Proactive. If you think that you need to change, things are not acceptable to you, you change. Yeah? You think about what you can do, because it keeps you in a mode which is proactive rather than complaining. That is good.
And it's the only thing you can control.
That is the only thing, exactly. And that can do wonders for you. In terms of your whole psyche, it can change. It can bring about a major inner revolution. Really, believe me. When you find something, when you find a cause, when you find a larger thing, and you work towards it, I tell you, your life and the whole universe begins to help you, and that is an amazing thing. But we are also afraid of living life differently and doing things differently. Okay. So first is to give up this illusion of control, and second, within that, because you don't control everyone doesn't mean you are passive and you don't do anything. Because that's another flip side. Okay? Because what you have within your so-called control is what? Your free will. So use it effectively. And this is how you get rid of a lot of your psychological fears also. The anger, because it's frustrations that are there. Okay? Trying to control everything is now channeled. All the energy that is saved from what? This anger and frustration and getting upset and all is channeled to what? Proactive actions. Doing something meaningful to change certain things. To channel your anger. So we are not talking about, we are not creating a rule. Don't be angry. Things will make you angry at times. Okay? What we are talking about is managing your anger constructively. So that it doesn't bring you down. You use it for what?
Lift you up.
Yeah, lift you up. This whole thing about this, the emotions as the Vedic and the Gita sees is, we don't say this is positive, this is negative. We don't name emotions. Because when you name an emotion negative, what happens? You are creating a fear of this negative emotion, of fear, of anger, of sadness, and then there is so much fear of having it, and you can't control having it. So you create a monster, inner monster, that you yourself are afraid of all these emotions, which are there, and you don't want to acknowledge them. What we say is, your first step in all these emotions are you need to acknowledge them. Because they are there. You can't afford to ignore them, because if you ignore them, they still continue to be there and they continue to distort your living. You need to acknowledge it. You need to understand why it is coming. You need to change the logic of your understanding. Certain distortions in your understanding you need to correct, and after that what? You need to manage those emotions and emerge as a winner, because you can actually, by managing those emotions, you can do many things. It's a completely different way of living. It's managing your life, managing your emotions rather than creating rules. This whole philosophy is not rule-based. It's changing your understanding and reorienting your life based on the new understanding. Sadness. Now, what is your question, Neema?
I was saying that insecurity is one of the big roots of all of these, like fear, anger,
Yeah, okay. So let's take insecurity. What do you think leads to insecurity? What is, first let's define what is insecurity. What is insecurity?
It's come down to control, maybe.
And fear of not having a fear of lacking.
Inadequacy.
Sorry?
Inadequacy.
Inadequacies, exactly. So these inadequacies, let's look at
Fear
other-
of it.
Yeah, right? The security is, I'm insecure, right? That means things are not totally right? And that is this whole inadequacy. You know, some of the most successful human beings can, with reference to themselves, they can still have a lot of insecurities. Because sometimes when you become very successful, your stakes become very high. When you have to protect the empire of millions of dollars, and anything can go wrong at any time, what happens? There are so many variables, right? And you're constantly working with all these n number of variables, and you don't have control over all of them, and the stakes are very high. So that means you can be very privileged on one hand, but what? Very insecure on the other hand. Okay? So insecurity is again coming from your inability to control everything. And you understand that in fact things don't happen according to my wishes. And anytime anything can go wrong. Okay? And that always makes you insecure. Then again, how will you change that? How will you change that? Really understanding it. That there are laws which are working. Within that, if I want to be proactive, what do? I see how the laws work and I do my best. That's the only thing I can really do. Okay? That is at a relative level. And at the absolute level, how do you take care of this insecurity? By re-understanding who you are. Are you this little individual who is subject to what? Different situations which can be not what you are looking for, or this inadequacy based on who you think you are. As long as you think you are an individual, insecurity you cannot totally get rid of. You can be relatively healthier, okay? But it can only be gotten rid of when you understand yourself to be not this little tiny individual in the scheme of things.
But if you have free will, you are an individual in this.
Yeah, so that means both coexist. That's what we say, that you need to first relatively free yourself from insecurities by understanding the laws and everything. But ultimately you also you can understand the fact that you are not just this entity subject to laws. You are what? The truth of all the laws and all the entities and everything. But you can't just go to the ultimate without fixing this. Because from all those insecurities you can't understand that all that is here is one. So you need to bridge the gap, and in that bridging of the gap is the understanding of the laws. And within those laws, you operate. And you correct your wrong thinking. So this is what we say, insecurity, sadness. Now the last one, do you have time? 5 minutes? Or you have to go? You have to go?
No,
Okay. So, yeah.
But if I be on,
No, we will stop here because we've done it for more than 1 hour. So, what the Upanishads are then saying is that all this work, even though Atma is free, all this work is essential before it becomes reality free. All this work? All this work on yourself is necessary before that becomes reality free. Om